Hey everybody, so today I'm going to show you how to make tiny slab built pots and a fun optional clay plant. So this demo is inspired by these little teeny tiny terracotta planters that my partner uses to propagate his plants. So it's a great option, especially as spring is upon us, to make something fun for that. Because of the form, they could also be all kinds of little things like Q-tip holders or a shot glass, whatever you want to do with them. But what originally inspired me are those little itty bitty terracotta plants. They're just too cute. So my example one here is made with a soft slab. I'm going to add a hole a little bit later. I'm just waiting for it to firm up. In some of my earlier demos, I've gone over slab rolling, so I'll do that a little bit, but for more information, you should probably check back on other videos because they're going to be more in depth. What you'll need today is clay. You'll again want paper, pen, and scissors to make a template. I have a scalpel, but you can use any kind of like a fettling knife or kitchen knife as long as it's small and not too clunky. Rib tool, and then for this particular project I thought it was nice to have some like small capsize things, so I used like a tea votive and the top of my dish soap, just because it's nice to get like a clean crisp circle that way. So the first thing that you're going to do is squish out and roll your slab as usual. So I'm not going to show that whole step again, but my last video went over that pretty thoroughly, so I have what I'm going to use this second part here. And if I wanted just to get it a little bit thinner, I can take my rolling pin from the kitchen and just kind of roll it out. Remember to go in several directions, and you don't want to squish too firmly on the table without switching it up. Because if you just keep going down one way, it's just going to fuse right onto the table, and your slab piece will never want to let go. So I have that ready, and then I'll talk a little bit about the templates. So for this shape, I made a template that is this kind of rainbow-ish shape. I recommend kind of using something that you want to mold it to and thinking about the taper. I always draw it out, try it as I'm kind of curling around, and I can always adjust. Therefore, like originally I kind of drew this, but I wanted to extend it so that I could take it down. If it doesn't roll up the way you want, like sometimes in my head I'll have like this nice curve shape, and then when I put it up here, one side will look awfully long, or the like just won't fit. So you can kind of make it work even if they overlap on the tips a little bit. I'll just make it into the shape that I want with the overlap, and then dot where I need to cut down. Another great option, especially if you're working with kids, is there are a lot of printable templates out there for making cones and cylinders, so that's a much easier option if you have access to a printer. I just don't right now because I'm still moving, so I did more of a like draw it out, see what happens, and take it down to where I want it. So this is going to be my template, and I just cut it out. It's just regular paper from a notebook. I'm going to come back to my slab and using just the outside here, I want to preserve this little part for my base and for my little clay plant. I'm just going to place that down and then cut around it. So just following my lines as best as possible. I like to kind of hold the template down and then cut around. I'm going to keep these little guys close to me because I'm going to use them to make my plant. And because this shape is so narrow, you will want to work with a soft slab. If you work with a firm slab, it will just kind of bend and then break because it's not squishy enough or malleable to shape. So peeling my template off. Again, you'll just kind of like work it towards itself. And I'll typically, when I'm doing this, kind of position its base on the bottom, and then kind of slowly inch my way towards the walls meeting. So to create like a nice smooth shape, I'm gonna bevel the edges a little bit. And before I do that, I'm gonna lay it flat again. So I just wanted to make sure that my shape actually worked. And then I'm gonna bevel these edges. So to remember, you want to make like a rhombus shape. Most of the time in the beginning, I would cut it and then do it the wrong way. So it should go kind of like that on either edges, even if they're curving. So one side will cut in and the other will cut out. And I'll show a zoom up of that just to clarify in just a second. So this makes it so that they'll kind of overlap each other and there won't be like as clunky of a seam. So this one's cutting in and that other one cut out at the opposite angle. So this one's kind of tapering in and this one's tapering out. That way, when I now officially work them towards each other, they will have a nice little overlap and not a big clunky seam. So I'm just gonna kind of position them. I'm going to do my scoring, and right now I'm just using my X-Acto knife, but you can use a needle tool, whatever you prefer. I forgot to mention that you will want slip as well. So that's liquid clay, and you can just, if you don't have some readily available, you can squish up your clay into like tiny, tiny little pieces, you know, like little scraps, wait for them to dry, and then add a little water and mix it up. So there's nothing like a fancy recipe for this. It's just to match the clay body. Just kind of dabbing that in there. I'm gonna go over so you can see they're scored and slipped, and then I'll go over my lines just a little bit so they're fresh. And then I'm working them towards each other. So depending on how fussy you want to be, I usually just kind of like get it together and then kind of pinch along that seam. Depending on, you can always add a little coil on the inside. This one's pretty well set, but I'll just show you that really quick. If you don't feel confident about your seam and you want a little bit of reinforcement, you can roll out a little coil from the inside. You'll kind of squish it in there, paying attention to not squishing your outside, and then you can do all that extra smoothing. So mine's pretty well set, so I'm not going to add that coil. I'm just going to pinch this and then take my rib tool and just smooth over that seam for now. You know, this is the quick and dirty method, but I would recommend kind of spending some good time getting that really squish on there and setting up. So this is my cylinder. I'm going to add my base and then I'll talk about the clay plant. So to add my base, I didn't feel confident using my X-Acto knife to draw a circle, and I didn't want to do a ton of extra cleanup, so this is where I used that cap. And I'm just squishing it onto the corner, just kind of squishing down, do a little twist back and forth, and then you should have that circle. And sometimes you gotta like pop it off. So I have my little circle. It's a little thicker than I want, so I'm just gonna kind of squish it down so that it is just a tiny bit bigger than the base of my cylinder. And I'll clean up the sides just using my finger. So just squishing it so it's not super thick. And then I will slip and score the bottom. So again, going with my scalpel on both the attached piece and the thing I am trying to stick it to. I'm going to score, dab, 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 and wiggle it on there. I usually like to have that set for a few minutes, and then I'll just come back, and using my other piece to show you, I'll take my finger and just squish from the bottom up towards the seam. Even if it gets a little bit messy at first, that's fine. You can kind of go both ways until it is nice and smooth and adhered on there. So now that I have my pot done, I'm going to do the optional clay plant. So the way that I did the plant is I took all my little scrappy dudes that came from me circling around and cutting off my template, and I just kind of squished them down and made them into a leaf-like shape. You can make flowers, roses, I'm sure there's all kinds of fun YouTube videos on how to make clay plants, but I wanted mine to look like a little succulent that's just starting to grow. So I'm just kind of squishing and layering them. And then I'm gonna take my tea votive cap, this other little area of my slab, and you just wanna make sure you find a cap that is just a little bit less than the top of your pot's diameter. So just a little bit smaller. Press down, peel off. And then this one, yep, that should be good. This is gonna be my base. So the way that I made mine, it's like this little cap on top, so it's optional. Oops. I can decide later if I want to make it actually for a live plant or my fun little decorative piece, or if I wanted to be really sneaky, I could have it live in there and then use this as like a tiny little jar. So that's kind of the logic behind why I made it that way. So then once I have my base, I'm just going to kind of squish down my little plant friend, roll out another coil to build up the soil and to keep it in place. And then I'm just kind of working that coil around and squishing it into place. So once I got that down, I'm just gonna again let that set up. Give it like 15 to so minutes, and then you can come back and do all your smoothing with a finger. You can go in and add a hole at the bottom with a needle tool. If you want some drainage, you can just kind of poke and circle it around. It won't need much. But I like to have it set up just a little bit so that it's firmer and easier for me to just take my finger and do all my last minute finessing. So that's the project for today. Hope you all are doing well, and I look forward to seeing if you make yourself any fun little clay planters. Thanks so much. Have a good one.